So Canada Day is just around the corner and I wanted to make another Minecraft mod, so what better time to make a Canada-themed Minecraft mod. I've come up with 4 features that I want to implement, and then I'll sort of flesh out features around them to make them more interesting and cohesive. So the 4 main things I want to make are maple syrup, moose, poutine, and beavers. It seems so simple in retrospect, but I am incredibly prone to going on random tangents. First up is maple syrup. Well, for maple syrup, you need maple trees. So I had to make a new tree type, a new sapling to grow that tree, a new biome to spawn the trees in, a new wood set including maple planks and maple boats and maple signs. This is 19 total blocks and items I had to add, and that's not even counting the maple syrup itself. Things have already gotten kind of out of hand. So to give the maple wood set an actual reason to exist beyond just getting maple syrup, I made it a light red color so that it gives a new option to make houses out of. Minecraft does this weird thing where like wool or concrete can be dyed different colors, but for wood, you're stuck with whatever color the wood from that tree is. Meaning you need fantasy trees like the warped trees in the Nether to get more interesting colors like blue. Or they need to really push the boundaries of what the color of a real life wood is, like how they make spruce really dark or cherry super pink to make them really stand out in game. To actually get maple syrup from a tree, you first need a tree tap. When placed on a maple tree, this provides maple sap. When placed on a regular tree, it gives just plain old sap. And on a pale oak tree, it gives resin. This was an idea that I didn't end up using for my peaceful progression mod that I made a video on previously, so I was happy to actually implement it here. Much like with my peaceful progression mod, I want to ensure that everything I add into this mod has multiple uses, which is why I added the 2 different sap types. Now, to make maple syrup, you need to boil down the sap and bottle it. Unfortunately, you can't do that with a furnace, because like, where do you put the bottles? So clearly, I needed to add an entirely new crafting block, the cooking pot, which has a fuel slot, a 2x2 crafting grid, and an extra slot for bowls and bottles. I chose this over doing something with, say, a cauldron and a heat source under it because I think it would be harder to convey to the player how to use a multi-block structure like that compared to a crafting block with just a little recipe book that they can click on. Also, this recipe book took me like 3 days to figure out. It was pure agony. I won't talk about it because this video is long enough as it is, but it was really bad. Okay, what else can we do with a cooking pot? Well, surely you'd cook food in it. So I've added alternate recipes for some base game foods that gives more output per input ingredient. So that fleshes out the cooking pot itself. Next, let's get some uses for that generic sap that I added that you get from ordinary trees. So first up, I'm going to do a slime ball recipe. You know, I gotta add an alternate method of getting a base game hostile mob drop. This recipe takes flour, which is another item I've added, and I'll get to why I've done that later. I also have a rubber recipe where you mix sap with a fermented spider eye. So rubber in real life is made by coagulating latex sap with some sort of acid, and the fermented spider eye stood out to me as the only acidic sounding item in the base game, so I just used it here. Now, what is rubber actually used for? So you know how the cooking pot makes it more efficient to make some base game foods? A notable category of these foods is soup. However, soup is terrible, just terrible in the game, not in real life. I love soup. Soup is the best. And this is because a single bowl of soup takes up 1 inventory slot, which you could otherwise be holding 64 steak in, or 64 chicken in, or 64 of any other non-soup food item. It's just a terrible way of managing your inventory. The reason why the game does this is because when you eat a soup, it replaces that soup stack with the bowl that the soup was in. And if you add 64 soup in your inventory and you try to eat it, it can't replace the remaining 63 soups with a bowl. I guess it could just put the bowl in a different inventory slot, but I don't know. I'm not Mojang. I didn't decide this. So I made it so that rubber is used to make a thermos, which can hold 64 soups in it. It's basically like the base game bundle item, which holds a mixed stack of 64 items, but it's just for soups. Right-clicking when holding the thermos will eat the first soup on the top of the stack, and it'll place the bowl somewhere in the thermos's inventory, making soup actually useful. It also works for potions, for milk, and for maple syrup. Speaking of maple syrup, remember when this mod was about Canada? I got really carried away here. Although I really like this thermos concept, so I'm happy this tangent led to something useful. However, let's get back on track. So to finish up with the maple syrup, I think it would be interesting for it to be useful beyond just being a food source. So I decided to give it a potion effect. Currently, there is no potion that gives the haste effect, which makes you break blocks faster. The only way to get haste in the base game is by building a beacon. So I made maple syrup give you haste. And with that, we have our first of 4 features done. It only took 19 new wood-related items, 2 functional blocks, and oh yeah, one last thing, because rubber only has 1 use currently, so I'm going to add a rubber block that bounces you like a slime block, but isn't sticky. Okay, I swear, the next features will be nowhere near as convoluted as this and will actually stay on topic. Since the cooking pot is fresh in our minds, let's move on to the poutine now. Definitely one of the best foods in Canada. This is French fries with cheese curds and gravy on top. Despite being 3 ingredients, you'd be amazed how often people get this wrong. No, you cannot put mozzarella instead. What part of cheese curds do you not understand? Cheese curds are made by coagulating milk with acid and bacterial culture, and that sounds a bit like how we were making rubber. So for this, it'll be milk plus a fermented spider eye.
Yummers.
Doesn't that just sound delicious? For the gravy, it will be a mix of flour, water, and meat, thus revealing the true reason why I added flour. And lastly, you gotta put it all together in a bowl in the cooking pot with the potatoes. This makes for an incredibly convoluted recipe that gives you an item with a max stack size of 1 because it's in a bowl. This is a bad food source. To remedy that, I'm making it so that it has a health bar. You can take a bite of your poutine 8 times, which fully restores your hunger each time you do it. It might now be a bit overpowered, but given the lengthy crafting recipe, I think it kinda evens out. Also, remember when I said I'd stop going on convoluted tangents? Just a little quick one here. I added doner, which is a sort of Frankenstein's monster of a doner kebab with beef and a sweet evaporated milk sauce that comes from Halifax, and pierogi, which is, while not Canadian in origin, shout out Eastern Europe, it is routinely picked as one of Canada's favorite foods. So I felt if Starfield of all things was going to have these foods in as Canadian representation, then I had to do it too. Okay, that's another feature down, and it only took 3 intermediate ingredients and me adding 2 extra food sources for no reason. We're getting more efficient with each feature. Next, let's go for the beaver. I had made 1 modded mob prior to this, which was a clam that did not move, so there were some growing pains here, a lot of uncharted territory. Eventually, I did get it working though, and with a few revisions to the appearance, I kept going back and forth on the eyes. We now have beavers. Now, what do the beavers do? Okay, well, for starters, you can breed beavers by feeding them sticks, and you can then kill them to get beaver pelts. A quick aside here to note that, yeah, Mojang no longer adds these sort of incentives to kill real-life animals in the game. The last animal that gave you something useful when killed was the rabbit, which gives you rabbit hide, which you make the aforementioned bundles out of, and also giving you just raw rabbit that you can cook. Now, rabbits were added coincidentally immediately before Microsoft bought Minecraft, and since then there's been no animal that you hunt for a drop. Now, that is surely a coincidence, but me personally, I'm not owned by Microsoft, so I can make my modded animals huntable. So for uses of pelts, well, I lived through Canadian high school history class, and as such, the beaver fur trade has been drilled into my brain. Europeans were apparently just going crazy for beaver pelt hats back in the day, so let's make a beaver pelt hat. This was immensely painful to program, potentially on par with that recipe book, but eventually I got the hat rendering properly. I was inspired by the turtle shell helmet in the base game when I was doing this. As the name suggests, this is a hat that's made from turtle scoot, which you get not by killing turtles, no sir, but by waiting for a baby turtle to grow up. With a turtle shell helmet on, you can breathe longer underwater. It gives a sort of potion effect while it's worn. So I wanted my beaver pelt hat to also do something similar. So while wearing it, you can chop down trees faster with an axe. Basically how this works is that when you have it on and you're holding an axe, you get the haste effect. Speaking of chopping down trees, beavers tend to do that as well, so I implemented that as part of their behavior. To make sure they don't tear your house down, I have them check for naturally spawned leaves on top of the logs they're cutting. The way that Minecraft does this is that when you grow a tree, all the leaves are marked as temporary, whereas if you break leaf blocks with shears and then place them to make your own decorations, they are marked as not temporary. So to check for a naturally spawned tree, I check for a temporary leaf. I also have them avoid trees that have tree taps on the side so that they don't inadvertently ruin your maple syrup production. And to make sure they don't just deforest entire areas, they automatically replant the tree they chop down, which enables you to make automatic tree farms with them. There's a cooldown period between when they chop the trees, which can be bypassed by feeding them maple syrup, or you can just send them into a minute-long chopping frenzy by feeding them one of the Canadian foods I added earlier. I also imagine this is not something that Mojang would do in an official update, like how they backtracked on adding fireflies that could be eaten by frogs because in real life, fireflies are poisonous to frogs, or how at first feeding cookies to parrots was going to be how you would tame them, but now it just kills them instead because that's what would actually happen if you did that in real life. In the same way, I don't think that it's very healthy for beavers to eat donair and poutine, but it's kind of funny. Also, as a bonus, I have made it so that the drowned zombies that you find in rivers are afraid of beavers and will run away from them, much like how creepers are afraid of cats. So, all around, there are a lot of uses for beavers. Okay, that one stayed a bit more focused. Will the same be true for the moose? Similar to the beavers, I added a few drops to the moose. They give you venison, which just acts as another food source, and they also drop leather on the off chance that you can't find any cows, and they drop their antlers. Be warned that moose will fight back, although they also randomly shed their antlers, so you can just have a peaceful farm without killing them. Why would you want their antlers though? Well, they can be crafted into bone meal, which is somewhat useful, but the main use is another custom helmet. The moose antler helmet also gives a buff like the beaver pelt hat did. It decreases knockback taken and increases your total health by 3 hearts. As for the moose itself, I thought it would be fun to turn them into a tameable mount that would act as an alternative to horses, much like camels do. Similar to the camel, the moose isn't as fast as a horse, but while a camel has the upside of seating 2 people, the moose has the upside of being able to swim with you on its back. This offers you the trade-off of moving slower across land, but not needing to stop to lead a horse across water. And with that, we're done the 4 features I set out to create. As one last thing, I want something to sort of tie it all together. To get the most out of this mod, you're going to need to find a maple forest biome since beavers and moose and the trees all spawn there. So to that end, I added a cartographer villager trade for a map that leads you to a maple forest biome, specifically to a lumberjack cabin that spawns only in this biome. This is similar to how base game biome finding can be achieved by purchasing a map to an ocean monument or to a taiga village or what have you. It took a few tries to get the structure working correctly, but here it is, on the surface this time. Just a little cabin with a few tapped trees and a lumberjack villager who buys and sells the items introduced in the mod and uses the tree tap as a workstation. As one final detail, I added a moose head block, which you get by blowing a moose up with a charged creeper, because what cabin is complete without a moose trophy on the wall? And yeah, so that's the mod. If you want to play it yourself, I'll have a download link in the description. And if you want to know how I made the mod, the code is open source and will be down there as well. Let me know if you have any ideas for future mods. Currently, I'm thinking of making my own take on an end update, and maybe a super flat progression mod in the style of my previous video. So let me know if you want to see either of that or you have your own ideas and suggestions. Also, if you do play the mod, let me know about any bugs you encounter or any ideas for enhancements that you might think of. Thank you to the guys on the Outer Wilds modding Discord who I bounced a lot of these ideas off of. Also, I know that is entirely the wrong modding Discord. That's not the right game, but yeah. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. I don't know. Okay, bye.